Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. During this period of lockdown, while many gamers are gnashing their teeth and being very, very aggravated at the fact that they cannot get together with their gaming groups and play games, solo gamers are potentially having a little bit of an easier time of it because it's pretty much business as usual for those guys. So today, I'm going to take a look at a game that I've been saying that I'm going to be taking a look at for a long time on the channel. It's Assassinorum Execution Force, which for me is one of my favourite solo games. It's actually a cooperative game. You can play it with up to 3 other players playing against the game system, but I think it works really well as a solo experience. This is actually one of the earliest boxed games that Games Workshop came out with when they started making boxed games again. I think prior to this, they'd only released Space Hulk and Dreadfleet, and Dreadfleet had not done particularly well. And I think most people sort of wrote this game off. It was quite expensive at the time. I believe they were charging £85, and a lot of people were just seeing it as a way of launching the 4 new Assassin miniatures that they had launched at the time, and this was kind of like the big grand entrance for those new miniatures. So I think a lot of people sort of wrote this off as being a throwaway game, and indeed it wasn't supported very much. There was a little bit of White Dwarf content for it, and because it's basically only one scenario, there's one mission that you can just keep playing through, I think a lot of people thought there wasn't going to be a lot of replayability. Obviously there's less replayability than if there were lots of different scenarios, but there is a way that they work replayability into the design of the system, and overall I still really enjoy this game. I think it's a very simple, streamlined, fun experience. So we're going to take a look at it now. As with any Games Workshop game, one of the big draws of Assassinorum Execution Force is the miniatures, but unfortunately not some of the strongest miniatures from Games Workshop in this particular set. The assassins are excellent, but everything else in the box is basically recycled from older miniatures, and they're not some of the best things. But the assassins are very nice indeed. You get a Vindicare assassin. This is my favourite of the assassins, although possibly the weakest in-game. He's kind of the traditional sniper, takes up a sniping position and cracks off the headshots. Next up we have the Eversor, who is kind of just a savage. He's brutal at close combat and at ranged, just incredibly violent. And this is the assassin that was actually made into an army of 1 character for Blackstone Fortress. Next up we have the Culexus, who has the HR Giga head, and it's actually a very busy miniature and very difficult to sort of understand it at first glance what's going on, but that's all the head going on up there. He's basically fear incarnate and is your anti-psyker character, really. And then we have the Callidus assassin, who is the fast-moving, close combat infiltration miniature. So those are your quote-unquote good guys, and they are facing this chap. He is the Chaos Sorcerer, who is basically your target for assassination. He is attempting to open the warp. They're always trying to do that, these Chaos boys, and he is ensconced in an enemy space station, and the assassins have to break in, get past the defenses, circumvent the guards, get into the inner sanctum and assassinate this guy before he can complete his work. And I have to say, this is one of the nicest miniatures I have in my collection. The only reason it's not painted is because he's part of this board game for me, because I don't have a Chaos 40k army that he would work in. So if I'm not planning on painting the whole box set, I tend not to paint anything, so he's just sat in grey plastic. But a lovely miniature, and I just really love the movement in him as he ascends this spike of toothy stone. Our sorcerer is accompanied by this cute little familiar, who is actually the timer mechanism for the game. He is walking around a ceremonial room, and if he completes a circuit of the room, it's game over. Besides that, you're basically getting a bunch of these Chaos cultists that have been kicking around for a while now. Not my favourite miniatures. They also came in Warhammer 40,000 Conquest magazine with one particular issue of that. So I've got quite a bunch of these now. They're okay. And finally, you get a set of 3 of these old Chaos Warriors, and really, these look quite pathetic compared to the newer Chaos Warriors that you can get, the Chaos Space Marines that are available now. He's just got spindly legs, and he just doesn't look particularly intimidating, especially compare him to the Space Marines from Blackstone Fortress. They are much more imposing, much chunkier, and an all-around more threatening presence than this guy. The board for this game is particularly unusual because it's modular, but it's not. It comes in 4 pieces, but they go together the same way, and yet there is a way to vary the layout from game to game. First of all, you get this inner sanctum tile. This is where the big bad is residing. He's going to be situated here in the center of this circle. This circle is numbered for his little chaos familiar to trudge around. And the idea is there's a main space station area that the assassins have to explore, and once they have found and activated the teleporter, they will teleport into this area here in order to take on the final challenge. And I have to say, at this point, the theme of this game is a really big selling point for me. I think it's such an exciting and fascinating concept that you have these 4 very different assassins that are sent on this mission. They go through a space station which is being patrolled by chaos units. They have to find a teleporter and find the power source for the teleporter to activate it, and then they teleport into this inner sanctum where there is a huge chaos sorcerer, and there's a final climactic battle where they all throw everything they've got left at this guy to try and take him down before the portal opens. It's really exciting, really thematic, very 40k. I mean, it's like playing through one of the books, really. And in fact, there was actually a book that they published when this game came out, which kind of told the actual story of the events that you're playing. So it shows one way that these assassins were able to complete this challenge before you play it your own way. So this is the inner sanctum. To begin with, you don't have access to it. And then you have these 3 huge tiles which go together to create the main station that you spend most of the game exploring. And these will only go together one way. There's 3 of them, and they are designed to fit in a sequence. Here you can see the board in a little bit more detail. You can see here, this is where our assassins will start the game. And you can see that we have these blank spaces which represent rooms, and they have Roman numerals in them. The rooms on the first board have a 3 in them. The rooms on the second board have a 2 on them. And a few of the rooms on the third board, the ones furthest away, have a 1 on them. And this is a really interesting way of changing up the layout of the board without changing the layout of the board, because you have a deck of chunky room tiles, and you shuffle these up at the start of the game. And whenever you get into a position where you have line of sight to one of these room spaces, so there's a doorway here, so if the assassin was here, they'd be able to look in here, see this room, you draw room tiles, and you draw room tiles equal to the number on the board. So in this case, I would draw 3. 1, 2, 3. You flip them over, and each room has a number, and you have to place the room with the lowest number. So in this case, I would place number 8, and that would go on the board like that, and would then get populated with enemies based on these chaos symbols that are on the boards. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Now, the point of searching these rooms is you need to find the teleportarium. However, you also need to find the control bank that will activate the teleportarium. This is the teleportarium. This is the control panel. And you can see that the control panel has a relatively high number of 11, and the teleportarium has a relatively low number of 5. So in a normal game, you'll probably find the teleportarium first, but won't be able to use it until you've activated it with the control panel. And the way that the exploration works is actually creates a very interesting situation, because if you immediately explore these rooms that are closest to the entry point, you're drawing 3 cards, and because you're placing the lowest card each time, even if you draw the teleportarium or the control bank, there's a good chance you won't actually be able to place it on the board because there'll be another card with a lower value. However, if you race to the far side of the board and explore those rooms, you only draw one card at a time. So you're going to have to be extra lucky to actually draw the card you want out of the deck. But if you do draw the card you want out of the deck, you're guaranteed to be able to place it on the map. So you need to balance up your options there between sifting through the deck quickly and being able to guarantee a placement, because each time you explore a new room, you shuffle the room deck. So there's always a chance that the cards you want are going to come up each time. And it's just quite an interesting way of creating those choices of, do I want to risk pulling the card I want for a guaranteed placement, or do I pull these cards quickly early on to get them out of the deck so I have more chance of placing the teleportarium exactly where I want it to be in the place that is most beneficial for me. And that's literally the crux of the whole first part of the game. It's getting to these rooms, drawing those cards, placing the rooms to actually activate the teleportarium and get off of this section of the board as quickly as possible, because the longer that you dally in this area, the more enemies are going to appear, the more risk there's going to be that you're going to get spotted, the more events are going to occur, and it will just make the whole process more difficult. And of course you are always racing against the clock as the Chaos Sorcerer attempts to open the portal. That's the overall concept of the game. Let's drill a little bit into the mechanisms and what I find interesting about them. We're going to do that first by taking a look at our Vindicare Assassin, and we're looking at the Vindicare Assassin because he's my favourite. So each assassin gets one of these cards, which has all of their relevant information on it. You can see that they've got a resistance value and they've got a stamina value, and then they have a list of actions. There's some stuff on the back of these cards as well. We will look at that in a moment. This is all pretty standard stuff. The resilience value is the number that an enemy has to roll or exceed to hit the Vindicare. So if someone's shooting at the Vindicare, you roll a d6, add any modifiers. If you get a 6, you inflict a wound. Stamina is the number of wounds that the Vindicare can take before dying. You can see he can only take 2, and that's actually the same for all of the assassins. They are 2 wounds and you're down. And that 2 wound system is something that we've seen in quite a few Games Workshop games. It was in Deathwatch Overkill, it was in Space Marine Adventures. It's something about that first wound putting you in a situation where every decision you make becomes much more important, even though it doesn't actually affect your combat prowess in any way. Suddenly you have to be a bit more cautious because it's only going to take one more lucky hit to take you down. But on your turn, you get to take 2 actions, and they cannot be the same actions. Most of the actions are kind of similar across the assassins, although the close combat and ranged combat values will differ. For the Vindicare, we've got a move of 6 squares, so you can use an action to move 6 spaces. And you cannot move diagonally, you have to move in orthogonal directions. The second action is a sprint action, which allows you to take a second move, but for a random distance. You roll the dice and you can move that many extra spaces. We then have the Sin Skin Heal ability, which all of the assassins have. You roll a dice and on a 2+ you can heal a wound. This is something that you're probably going to want to do if you take a wound, because you only have 2 in total, but there's still that slim chance that you might fail. You might roll a 1 and you don't get the wound back, and also it's burning one of your 2 actions, and if you've already taken a wound, there's a good chance that you're already in a bind, that you're already in a tricky situation, and you may find that you have to make an agonizing choice between burning an action to possibly heal a wound, or just making a run for it and trying to get into a safer space, or trying to kill an enemy before they get a chance to take another shot at you. The Vindicare then has 2 attack options. He's got his Shoot with Exitus weapon, where you roll the dice, you add 1 to the value, and if it meets or exceeds the resilience of the target takes a wound. And then he has Fight with Combat Blade, which is just a straight up d6. Again, roll the d6, compare to the resilience of the target. If it matches or exceeds it, the target takes a wound. Most of the enemies only have a single wound, but the Space Marines have 2, and the Chaos Sorcerer has 3. And it is important to note that regardless of how many dice you roll to make an attack, you only pick the highest value, so you're only inflicting a single wound regardless of how many dice you roll. This is important with characters such as the Eversor, who gets to roll 3 dice when he fights with his Neuro Gauntlet and sword, but he's still only inflicting 1 wound maximum from that particular attack, which makes those Space Marines much more dangerous because you have to take 2 actions to take them down under normal circumstances. You have to make a concerted effort to take them down before they retaliate. What makes these characters really interesting is they all have a set of special abilities and tactics. Abilities are always on skills. They're skills that you have access to throughout the whole game. In the case of the Vindicare, he has the Deadshot ability, which says provided the Vindicare assassin has not yet moved this turn, his shoot with Exodus weapon action has no maximum range. It's resolved with a +2 instead of a +1 and will cause 2 wounded counters to be placed on a renegade that is hit instead of just 1. So you can see that this is a character who is the one that you want to be targeting Chaos Space Marines, because Chaos Space Marines have those 2 wounds, and he can actually kill them with a single attack, whereas normally you would take 2 actions to do that. But getting those bonuses is difficult because you have to be in a position where you haven't moved this turn. So you're always thinking a turn ahead with the Vindicare. It's probably why I like him so much. He's a very thoughtful character. You have to move him into a position that you know that an enemy is going to advance into his line of sight on their turn, so that when you get back to your turn again, you can take advantage of this Deadshot ability and really take down those big tough targets. His second ability is the Stealth Suit, which says renegades do not have line of sight to the Vindicare assassin if the distance between them is greater than 6 squares. So as long as he's at range, he can sit there out in the open without getting seen, taking these Deadshot pot shots at people as they wander by, and not suffering any consequences. Each assassin also gets 2 tactics. They have their Primaris tactic, and that can be activated 3 times, and then they have their Omegon tactic, which can be activated once. So these are limited use things that you have to really make a good choice of when to use them. The Vindicare has Exodus ammo, which says the Vindicare assassin can re-roll the dice after failing to score a hit when performing a shoot with Exodus weapon action. So 3 chances to re-roll when it really matters. You want to combine that tactic with your Deadshot ability in order to guarantee you can take out those Space Marines. He also has the Omegon tactic Blind Grenade, which says choose any renegade in the Vindicare assassin's line of sight that is within 6 squares. And 6 squares is basically the standard range for everything in this game. If something's within 6 squares, you can shoot at it or attack it. That renegade and all other renegades that are adjacent to the renegade are stunned until the start of the next assassin phase. So you're not killing anything, but you're basically doing a splash stun attack, which will give you the chance you need to either take on some dead shots for people that have been stunned in front of you, or get out of dodge if you're in trouble, or give your friends an opportunity to come in and stab up enemies that might otherwise overwhelm you. It's kind of like your last gasp. This is my chance to escape because I'm in trouble. And it's the combination of abilities and tactics that really gives all of the assassins their personal character and makes each one interesting to play. We'll very quickly flick through all of the other abilities and tactics that are available. As you can see, the Eversor is rolling a lot more dice when shooting or fighting in close combat, but isn't getting any modifiers on those dice rolls, so a little bit more random, a little bit less precise, but he puts out a lot more damage potential. His abilities are Hypermetabolism. You roll a dice each time the Eversor assassin suffers a hit, and on a 5+, the Eversor assassin negates that hit and no wounded counter is placed on him, so he's a really good character for getting into the thick of the fight. He also has Combat Drugs, which says the Eversor assassin can perform the same action up to twice in the same turn, so he can do 2 melee attacks or 2 ranged attacks. His Primaris tactic is Friends On, not Friend Zone. It says the Eversor assassin can perform an extra action this turn, so he really has a lot of potential for moving around doing lots of damage. His Omegon tactic is Bio Meltdown. All assassins and renegades within 6 squares of the Eversor assassin suffer a hit on the dice roll of a 4+. The Eversor assassin is killed if he uses this tactic. So this is a real sacrificial play. Something that you want to do at the end of the game. Take down that Chaos Sorcerer with one last gasp, massive explosion, big climactic movie finish. Take everybody with you, but get the job done. The Culexus assassin rolls 2 dice when shooting and 1 dice with a +1 modifier when fighting in close combat. His abilities are Ethereum. Renegades apply no modifiers to dice rolls when targeting the Culexus assassin with shoot or fight actions. And he also has Pariah. Psychic events do not apply to the Culexus assassin. In addition, if any psychic events were drawn in the Chaos phase, the Culexus assassin may re-roll the dice when performing a shoot with Animus Speculum action in the next assassin phase. So he actually benefits from psychic events happening around him. And we'll look at psychic events in a moment when we look at the various event cards that can happen when you're playing the game. His Primaris tactic is Psych Out Grenade. Choose any renegade in the Culexus assassin's line of sight that is within 6 squares and roll a dice. On a 4+, that renegade is stunned, and if that renegade is the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, place a wound counter next to him. So again, this is something that you want to save towards the end of the game. Throw everything you've got at that Chaos Sorcerer. And I didn't mention this before, but tactics are something extra you can do on your turn in addition to your actions. So you get your 2 actions as standard, and you can also perform 1 tactic each turn, either one of your Primaris tactics or your single Omegon tactic. And you can perform that tactic at any point during the turn. So you can perform your actions as standard, see what's happened, see whether your plan has worked, and then use your tactic to get out of trouble if you need to. And then we have the Omegon tactic, Soul Horror. All renegades within 6 squares of the Culexus assassin are stunned until the start of the next assassin phase. Finally, we have the Callidus assassin, who rolls 2 dice when shooting. She only rolls a single dice in close combat, but gets a +2 to the modifier. Her abilities are acrobatic. The Callidus assassin can move through Servants of Chaos, but cannot end her move on the same square. And she also has Hit and Run. The Callidus assassin may, after performing a fight with phase sword action, perform a free sprint action. She can also perform a normal sprint action in the same turn, so she's very fast. Her Primaris tactic is Poison Blades. The Callidus assassin can re-roll the dice after failing to score a hit when performing a fight with phase sword action. And her Omegon tactic is Polymorphine. Renegades do not have line of sight to the Callidus assassin and cannot shoot or fight her until she next performs any action other than sprint. Whilst the Callidus is under the effects of polymorphine, exclude the Callidus assassin when determining who is the closest assassin model for any rules purposes. Servants of Chaos can move through the Callidus assassin whilst she is under the effects of polymorphine, just as if she was a Servant of Chaos, because basically she has changed her appearance to make herself look like a villain, and as long as she only uses the sprint action, which means she's rolling a dice to move a random number of spaces each turn, she's effectively representing that she's just ambling around on guard duty and isn't going to draw any attention to herself and can gradually sneak past enemies. But of course, doing that means she's very slow. It's going to take a long time to get where she needs to go, and you may run out of time before you get to resolve the issue. And that's our assassins. As you can see, the game mechanisms themselves are very simple. It's a very simple D6 combat system where you're rolling a dice and comparing it to a target value, and if you match or beat it, you inflict a wound. There's no opposed dice rolling, and it's all very, very straightforward. But the depth of the decision making comes from the various abilities and tactics that you have available to your character, and how you explore the board, which rooms you reveal when you reveal them. Of course, the reason you need all these abilities and tactics is because the place you are exploring is teeming with chaos, the renegades that keep being referred to. Of course, our villains have reference cards as well, which are very similar to the assassin cards. There's one for each of the 4 main types of enemy. We have the Chaos Cultist with the auto gun, which has Resilience 4, Stamina 1, rolls 2 dice when shooting, 1 dice when attacking with fists. We have the Cultists with the auto pistols, who have the same Resilience and Stamina, but only roll 1 dice when shooting and roll 2 dice in close combat. We then have the Chaos Space Marines, who are Resilience 5 with 2 Stamina. They shoot with their bolt gun, rolling 2 dice and getting +1 modifiers on the rolls. And they also fight in close combat with their knives and bolt pistols, again rolling 2 dice and getting +1 to the modifiers. Remember, you only ever pick the highest dice roll. Finally, we have the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, who has the Resilience 6, Stamina 3, rolls 2 dice with +2 modifiers in shooting, and 3 dice with +2 modifiers in close combat, so a bit of a beast. They all have one ability, which is a special reaction attack, which is a little bit like Overwatch from Space Hulk, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about renegades who are on alert. Before we take a look at exactly how those enemies are moving around and interacting, because obviously this is a cooperative game, so the enemies are using an AI system, it's worth noting just a few little intricacies in how this game handles things like movement and line of sight. First of all, facing does matter. Here's my Vindicare. He's facing this way. He can't see these spaces here. This is important for a lot of reasons because this is a stealth game. It's really important to be able to sneak behind enemies without being seen. You need to pay attention to which way the enemy is facing. If you've ever played Metal Gear Solid, you're one step away from walking around with a cardboard box in this game. It really does have that original Metal Gear vibe to it. So your facing is important, and also line of sight is dealt with in a very interesting manner because you work out line of sight by looking at the space directly in front of you and seeing if you can see into that space or whether your vision into that space is blocked. If you can see into that space, you then move outwards once each side and then draw a 3-wide corridor along, and that represents your line of sight. So in this particular case, this space is blank, so I can see this space, I can see this space, and I can see this space because those are the 3 directly in front of me. However, I then hit a wall here and here, but my central vision is still clear. So I can see this space, this space, this space, and all the way along this corridor. If I was standing here, I can't see this space because of the wall, which means I can't see anything at all. I am stuck in the corner, like in the Blair Witch Project. I cannot see a thing. If I was facing this way, so I'm looking dead at this room here, I can see this space, and because I can see this space, I can see the 2 adjacent spaces, and then I can see everything in a 3-wide corridor down. I can see everything in that room. I can see everything, I can shoot everything. This creates some really interesting placement choices. For example, if I don't want to reveal this room just yet, because every time you reveal a room, you're going to reveal some enemies. If I don't want to reveal this room just yet, I can position myself here in this corridor, and I'm looking down this way, but because of the way that the line of sight works, I can see this space, and then we go 1 each side. I can see down this corridor, but because of this wall, I can't see there. Because I can't see there, I can't see there. I can see down here, but I can't see down here. So even though I'm standing there, I can't see that room, which means I don't reveal that room, I don't reveal any of the enemies in it, which means I can wait until my next turn when I have my 2 actions and I'm in a better position to do something about what's going on in there. It's a slightly unusual line of sight system. It sounds weird when you explain it, but it really does work well for the style of gameplay because you constantly need to think about blind spots and walking behind enemies and thinking about which direction an enemy is going to face. Speaking of enemies, let's take a look at how they work. At the start of the game, when your 4 assassins arrive at the station, and you always use all 4 assassins, the enemy do not know about your presence. The enemy are expecting attacks, so they are patrolling the area, but they are not actively searching for you. They're on set patterns, patrolling around the area, and will follow a semi-randomized path around the building. Some enemies pop when rooms are revealed, but a lot of the time the enemies are coming from specific entry points or spawn points around the board. There are 5 around the edge of the board, and then there is 1 in the middle here. So there's 1 here, that's another one, there's 1 up here, and then there's 3 more just out of camera shot. At the start of the game, there are just 4 enemies on the board, and they are all cultists with autoguns, like this guy here. You simply roll a dice, and you place them on a spawn point that matches the dice number you rolled, and they have to face the direction of the spawn arrow. So this guy here is facing this way, and as we know from the line of sight rules, he can see this space, this space, this space, and then he can also see down here. More of these guys will also spawn during event phases. So first of all, at the start of each phase, each assassin will take 2 actions and possibly perform some tactics. After the assassin phase, we go into the chaos phase. The first thing that happens in that phase is the chaos familiar will move 1 space along the ritual tracker. The next thing that happens is you draw event cards, and you draw 1 event card plus an additional event card for each renegade who is on alert, up to a total of 4. And renegades who are on alert are ones who have become aware of the presence of the assassins. So if you rush around this game barreling into the enemies, getting seen, shooting your gun so that you draw attention to yourself, you're very quickly going to get swarmed with enemies because you keep drawing event cards. And there's a big old deck of event cards that do all sorts of different things. This is one that is an elite patrol, which says place a Chaos Space Marine on entry point 1 facing the direction shown. If the Chaos Space Marine cannot be placed on the entry point 1, place it on the closest unoccupied entry point instead. No Chaos Space Marine is placed if all entry points are occupied or there is no Chaos Space Marine model available. And they all do things like that. Some of them are psychic events. For example, we have the event Dark Runes, which says this is a psychic event. With the exception of the Culexus assassin, assassins cannot perform sprint actions in the next assassin phase. So, whilst most of these event cards will spawn new enemies, occasionally you will get events like this which cause additional problems. Of course, this psychic event also is beneficial to the Culexus, who gets boosts whenever psychic activity happens. Besides emerging from spawn points as a result of event cards, the other main way in which enemies will arrive on the board is when the assassins search rooms. So we're going to take a quick look at how that happens in a little bit more detail. As we know, rooms are generated when the assassins get line of sight to these areas on the board. So in our example here, we have the Vindicare. He's walking down the corridor from this direction. At the moment, because of the narrow corridor, he only has line of sight coming down here. As he moves forwards here, his line of sight will expand out, but he can't see either of these rooms. Even when he's here, as long as he's facing this way, this room will not be revealed because his line of sight is carrying on down this way. However, as soon as we turn to explore this location, we have to interrupt our action. At that point, we draw a number of cards equal to this value here. In this case, we're drawing 1 card. Let's say we get this one. The artwork is very nice on these cards. Any red bounded areas are basically terrain that you cannot walk into. In this case, it's some kind of fancy desk. You will also see there is 1 chaos mark. This will represent where a new renegade will arrive. And we also have an arrow here next to the number. The number, as we know, determines which card you place when you have multiple options. The arrow defines the orientation of the tile. We place it matching the direction that the arrow is pointing on the board. So this tile will go this way. Having placed the tile, we need to spawn a renegade on this space here, and we spawn a renegade with an autogun if one is available. If one isn't available, we instead spawn one with an auto pistol, and the renegade will spawn facing the direction of the large arrow on the chaos symbol. So in this case, he will go on here, facing this direction. The Vindicare has nipped around the corner and come face to face with an enemy. However, the Vindicare does have the element of surprise, so at the point that we've populated the room, we place a stunned marker next to each renegade. That means on this turn, that renegade will not do anything. At the beginning of the next assassin phase, this token gets flipped over and it says alert. And now this renegade is on alert and is dangerous. He's seen the Vindicare. He knows the assassins are here. He's going to try and raise the alarm. He's going to try and hunt down the assassins and kill them. But of course, by that point, the assassins have had another round of activations and hopefully have had enough time and enough opportunity to remove this threat from the board. And that's how populating enemies in the rooms works. Once you've dealt with event cards, you deal with the renegades who are on patrol. The players have to activate every enemy that is on patrol, and you can activate them in the order of your choice. So it's a good idea to think about where they're going to end up and what they're going to do. And all you do is you roll a d6 for them, and then you move them along the path. For example, our gentleman here would move one space forwards. Once he gets here, he has a choice. We look here and on the board it says roll a dice. On a 4 to 6 he will head off down this corridor. On a 1 to 3 he will head off down this corridor. So we go 1, we roll the dice, say we get a 4. He will then go 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's an arrow pointing this way, so he will turn again. He will go here, and then there's an arrow pointing this way, so he will turn here, and then he will tootle off down here, off of camera. And all of the on-patrol enemies will do the same thing. So they roll a dice to see how many spaces they move, and then they follow the arrows around the board. If at any point during that movement the renegade gains line of sight to an assassin, then the renegade will immediately stop moving and will go onto alert. And that's when things get problematic for the assassins, because someone is aware of their presence and things can start to escalate if they don't deal with that quickly and take that threat out. After dealing with the renegades on patrol, you deal with the renegades who are on alert, and that includes the ones that have just gone on alert from being on patrol. And there's a very handy flow diagram on the back of the rules just to help you through this process. But basically it works out that if an assassin is adjacent to your renegade, then the renegade moves to face that assassin and then attacks in close combat. If there's not an assassin adjacent, but there is an assassin within 6 squares of the renegade and within its line of sight, the renegade shoots. If there isn't an assassin within 6 squares, you have to ask whether the renegade has already moved during the chaos phase. If it has, then you don't do anything else, and that's the end of your turn. Or otherwise, you roll a dice and the renegade moves that many squares towards the closest assassin along the shortest path. So they're aware that the assassins are somewhere, but they haven't actually seen them yet, and they head towards them. It is possible for renegades to be on alert without having seen an assassin whilst they were on patrol first, because if an assassin moves into the line of sight of a renegade on their turn, then the renegade immediately goes onto alert. And also, if an assassin shoots or fights a renegade and fails to kill him, then that renegade will go onto alert as well, because obviously he's just gone, hold on, someone's shooting at me. Once renegades are on alert, they also have an ability called a reaction attack, where the first time in each phase that an assassin moves or sprints into a square within 6 squares of them that they can see, they will take a shot. And if they do that, any other renegades that are within 6 squares of that renegade will also go onto alert. So there's a real chance for things to snowball. It's a case that you should avoid being seen as much as possible. If you do get seen, deal with the person who has seen you as quickly and quietly as possible before moving on with your day. Because finally, the last thing that will happen on a turn is a phase called Raise the Alarm, where any renegades who are within 6 squares of a renegade who made a shoot or fight action will then go on alert. So basically, the way it works is as an assassin moves, they have the potential to make people aware of them, and then renegades will go on alert. When the renegades are patrolling, if they happen to see an assassin, they will go on alert. If renegades who are already on alert attack or see an assassin, they will cause other people to go on alert, and it will just get worse and worse and worse for you. But that's basically it. Turns are very quick, very smooth. It's very easy to figure out where the patrolling renegades are supposed to go. It's very quick to figure out which renegades are attacking who and why. Assassin turns are very quick because they only have the 2 actions and possibly a tactic each, and there's no hidden cards or card play, which also makes this very, very easy to play solo. You can very quickly get through your turns, and that's why I like this as a solo experience so much. It's very quick, very smooth, very efficient, and it's a lot of fun. And while the scenario is always the same, you're always trying to get to that Chaos Sorcerer, they have done something to improve replayability somewhat. In the back of the rules book, they have included a series of achievements, like computer game achievements, where once you've completed the game, you can pick one or more of these achievements and try to complete them. For example, we have the Execution Force complete the mission without a single assassin being slain. We have Ahead of schedule, complete the mission before the Chaos Familiar reaches square 10 on the ritual tracker. Down here, we have the very interesting Lone Operative. Complete the mission teleporting only a single assassin to the Temple of Shades, which is the final Inner Sanctum battle against the Chaos Sorcerer. And then you also have I Work Alone. Complete the mission using only a single assassin instead of all 4. Of course, if you complete that one, then you complete that one by default. So there's a whole bunch of these that they're little challenges to set yourself. If you get really good at the game, you can start introducing those and challenge yourself in different ways. And they actually published an extra set of these achievements in White Dwarf magazine. And that wasn't the only White Dwarf content they published. They also included rules for including a demon prince in your game in an issue of White Dwarf that I just so happen to have here. Who remembers when White Dwarf was rubbish and little and came out like every week? They included a simple set of additional rules where you could replace your Chaos Sorcerer with a Chaos Demon Prince. And that's it. That's Assassinorum Execution Force. A really, really good game that I think didn't get the credit it deserved when it came out for various different reasons. I mean, a lot of people were immediately writing off and saying it was going to be rubbish before it ever hit retail. I really enjoy it. I can't say it's going to be for everyone. I think some of these slightly unusual line of sight rules might cause people some concern, but I think those are necessary to make the patrolling renegade system work well. And again, the lack of a lot of different scenarios may cause people some concern, and of course the lack of any additional support really, apart from a set of achievements and the Demon Prince rules in White Dwarf. Games Workshop didn't support this game at all. And of course, it's now out of print as well, although I have still occasionally seen it on shelves gathering dust here and there. But I enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun. It's a really good solo experience, and I've had some good fun playing this with friends as well. But that is it from me for now. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed it, please consider pressing the like button. If you have really enjoyed it, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.